article on page 15. The Hindu carries an article that explains the important roles of Assam Rifles. In India's national security and internal security, Assam Rifles has been repeatedly in news, mainly because of the ongoing ethnic violence in Manipur. And the standoff which has occurred between Manipur State Police and Assam Rifles, there is a lot of controversy surrounding this paramilitary organization called Assam Rifles. So from internal security point of view, for your mains, it is very, very important topic, because under the UPSC syllabus, UPSC expects you to study the security forces of India, understand their structure and mandate, and the issues that they are dealing with. So let me give you a basic insight into Assam Rifles, which can help you to write this answer. Assam Rifles is one of the Central Armed Force CAPF under Ministry of Home Affairs. The Ministry of Home Affairs, which is responsible for internal security and border management, it has its own central police force, that is Central Police Force called CAPF, PFS, Central Armed Police Force. So along with the Assam Rifles, it includes the BSF Border Security Force, ITBP, CISF, CRPF and NSG, National Security Group. So all these central armed forces, right, these are essentially paramilitary forces. So these armed police force which are under Home Ministry, they are clubbed under CAPF or Central Armed Police Force. Essentially, they are the police forces of center. They are primarily used in an internal security role to counter insurgency, to counter terrorism, if required to secure borders, and also during disaster management for managing elections. Right. So CAPF plays a role in India security. Assam Rifles is one of them. It is one of the most important paramilitary organization in India, because it also the oldest paramilitary force of India. It was established by British in 1835. Its history traces back to the colonial period, and it was established as a Chacha levy in 1835, primarily to protect the British settlement from tribal communities in the northeast of India. So the British were very, very interested in resources of northeast, the forest resources particularly. But as you know, northeast is home to several indigenous tribal communities. So the British who kept their eyes on the precious forest resources, the forest resources of northeast, they tried to consolidate their settlements and their control over the resources by establishing a force called Chacha levy force to keep a check on the tribal communities. Here, to secure these settlements, their plantation crops, their forest resources from tribal indigenous communities present in the northeast of India. So when it was established in 1835, it was called as a Chacha levy force. It wasn't called as Assam Rifles. That name was given much later. A part of Chacha levy force was merged with a frontier force to secure the borders as well in the remote tribal areas of northeastern India. And this was in 1800s. Then during the First World War, around 3,000 soldiers from Chacha levy force were deployed along with the British Indian Army to fight in Europe and West Asia. So these personality soldiers, they were involved in the First World War on behalf of the Allied powers, representing the British Indian armed forces, and they fought conflict in Europe and in West Asia. They experienced a global conflict, and they are a part of these critical theaters of conflict across Europe and West Asia. So because of the contributions they made and how these riflemen fought bravely along the British with the British riflemen, so to pay tribute to these forces, British renamed them as Assam Rifles. Because the riflemen of Chacha levy, they fought very bravely along with the rifles regiments of British Army, particularly in Europe and near Israel and Syrian region. So to honor them, to pay tribute and respect to them, British renamed the forces as Assam Rifles in 1970. Then during the Second World War as well, the Assam Rifles saw action in the northeast of India. I am sure you know the Imperial Japan, fascist Japan, which had aligned with the Nazi Germany, and Mussolini Italy was committing brutal atrocities across Asia from China to Southeast Asia. Imperial fascist Japan was a terror committing massive genocides. So when Japanese forces entered the India-Burma border, it was Assam Rifles which engaged them through a unit known as Victor Force. Victor Force was a special unit created by drawing soldiers of the British Indian Army and Assam Rifles, and the Victor Force was one which countered the Japanese invasion near Nagaland and resisted the Japanese invasion into the Indian subcontinent. They also played a key role in evacuating refugees from Myanmar. Several tribal communities including a strong Tamil community present in Burma were evacuated as refugees by the Assam Rifles. This was a tremendous contribution of Assam Rifles during the Second World War. So post-independence, India inherited this force and it became one of the vital paramilitary organizations of India. A paramilitary force is somewhat in between a regular armed force and a police force. Your armed force like army, navy, air force, right? They are trained to tackle an external enemy. They are trained to kill. They are trying to fight wars. So your armed forces of your defense forces, as you call them, under the Ministry of Defense, they carry heavy weaponry like artillery guns, battle tanks, fighter jets. They are trained to use the heavy forces as a first option to cause maximum damage because they are fighting an external enemy. Whereas your police force, on the other hand, they are very sensitized. For a police force, using a force is the last option as a last resort. So police forces are sensitized forces which are trained to deal with the law and order situations in very sensitized manner. They use forces, they draw their guns only as a last resort. And as you see, police forces, they don't carry heavy weaponry, but to deal with certain special security situations, you need a mix of the resources and talent that combines the police and armed forces. For example, to deal with the armed rebellion and to deal with the separatist movement, that is to carry out counter-insurgency operations or to secure the border, you need a force which is a mix of armed force in their training, in their preparedness, in their resources, while bringing the sensitivity of your police. This is where paramilitary forces are raised. Paramilitary, right? There are a combination of your military forces, your armed forces, and your police in India. These paramilitary forces are officially called as CAPF. So post independence, Assam Rifles played a key role in two conflicts as it acted as a second line of defense. During wartime, the Central Armed Force, CAPF, be it Assam Rifles or BS Border Security Force, SSB, they all act as a second line of defense to back up Indian Army during conflict. So during the two wars with China and Pakistan, Assam Rifles played a key role in backing up the Indian Army in the northeastern sector. It was following these wars that Assam Rifles was placed under the operational command of the Indian Army, thus bringing it under the Ministry of Defense. As far as operational control was concerned, all right, so this is where you should understand the dual control over Assam Rifles. It is very important topic. It's a standing issue even today. Assam Rifles is subject to dual control of the Home Ministry and the Defense Ministry. As far as administrative control is concerned, that is which with regard to recruitment, training, transfer, promotions, salaries, pensions, all these administrative issues related issues, they are under the Ministry of Home Affairs. Ministry of Home Affairs even today is the charter controlling authority of Assam Rifles, but when it comes to operational control on the ground, the operational command of Assam Rifles has been given to the Indian Army, thus bringing it under the operational control of Defense Ministry. Because the Assam Rifles play a key role in Northeast India in conducting counter-insurgency, counter-terrorist operations in assistance with the Indian Army under the special powers given through the Armed Force Special Power Act it gives special powers to security forces in the disturbed areas, and some rifles plays a critical role in backing the Indian Army in counter-insurgency, counter-terrorist operations. So for operational convenience, following the 6265 war, the operational command of Assam Rifles was placed under the Indian Army, that is under the Defence Ministry. So only with regard to deployment on the ground, only with regard to operation being conduct the army's exercises, conduct control over Assam Rifles. So Defence Ministry also has had operational control, but all administrative matters fall under the Home Ministry. Now this has created a problem. It creates a problem for the personnel, for the troops which are a part of Assam Rifles. For them it's a problem. Their transfer, their promotions, their salaries, pensions are getting affected. That is why many personnel have approached the Supreme Court as well, through which they are urging the government to remove this dual control and bring Assam Rifles under the either Defence Ministry or Home Ministry, because all CAPFs are just under the Home Ministry, like BSF for example, NSG, CISF, CRPF, they are all just under the Home Ministry, whereas Army, Navy, Air Force, Coast Guard, they are under Defence Ministry. Assam Rifles is the only unit which has a problem because of the dual control. So many officers, many retired officers are still struggling with their pension. They have approached the Supreme Court urging the government to remove this dual control and place it under one of the ministries. Is that clear? So it's a primary theatre of operations is in Northeast India, and it's also the border guarding force under the one border, one force, one policy that was adopted after the Kargil war. Following the Kargil war, the Kargil Review Committee had been set up to identify the security gaps. Because the Kargil conflict was essentially a massive intelligence and military failure on India's part to identify the weaknesses and gaps in our security, the then Vajpayee government had set up the Kargil Review Committee. It was added by Dr. K. Subramaniam, a top strategic expert of that point, also is the father of the current Foreign Minister Dr. Jaishankar. Review committee suggested several reforms for India's scrutiny architecture. One of the most important reform was to streamline border security and border management. So prior to Kargil war, the approach to border security was that the same border would be guarded by multiple forces. Now that was creating confusion and lack of coordination. That's why Kargil Review Committee suggested that have one dedicated force for one entire border, and one border, one force policy was implemented, and the recommendation was adopted by the Vajpayee government. So since then we have one paramilitary force, one CAPF, which is entirely responsible for guarding and securing one particular border, like BSF is entirely responsible for guarding our borders with Pakistan and Bangladesh. One border, one force SSB is responsible for guarding our borders with Nepal and Bhutan. Similarly, Assam Rifles is responsible for guarding the borders with Myanmar. It was also a part of the Indian peacekeeping force in Sri Lanka in 1987. Few units of Assam Rifles were also deployed as a part of IPKF mission, which was the Operation Pavan, to implement the provisions of the Indo-Sri Lankan Peace Accord of 1987. Alright, it's primarily used in counter-insurgency, counter-terrorist operation and functions under the operational command of Indian Army in the Northeast, and is a valuable contribution of Assam Rifles to the Indian security. So please remember its history, structure, the issues as it is facing, its contribution to the national security of India. Now it's bring my detailed discussion to an end. We proceed to a smaller articles which quickly go through the first page. We have an article referring to the situations in Manipur, where a group of Meitei families that fled across the border into Myanmar when the massive ethnic riots broke out. So this article is focused on the plight of these families that have taken shelters in Myanmar in the forested area of the India-Myanmar border, but they are not able to come back to India. So the article itself is not relevant for our exam, but the article makes a mention of a very, very important highway, Asian Highway number 1. Asian Highway has been mentioned in this article. So let us see what is the highway, and which is the longest road route in Asia. It is in a UN BAT initiative to connect important roads or highways network across multiplication countries. It runs all the way from Tokyo in the east, that is in Japan, to Turkey in the near Istanbul in West Asia. It passes through the Korean Peninsula. China, it cuts across Southeastern Asia, across Vietnam, Cambodia, Thailand, Myanmar, and then enters India, Bangladesh. In fact, our IMT trilateral highway is part of this link. The India-Myanmar Thailand trilateral highway, which are setting up, will be a part of this Asian highway number 1, which is a UN-backed initiative. It's not an entirely new highway project, but the existing highway of these Asian countries will be interconnected to facilitate smooth movement of vehicles from east to west. It passes from India to Pakistan, Afghanistan, Iran, and enters Turkey and reaches the European border. It connects with the European route E80 that further runs all the way till Lisbon in Portugal. And alright, it is of course an upcoming initiative. Not all the connections have been established. For example, between India-Pakistan road connections are not open, but it is an initiative that countries are working on with backing of the UN to create this Asian highway number 1, which is the longest highway in Asia. Is that clear? That is, be aware of this alignment of this project. Next on page number 3, there is a mention of UN Population Fund with regard to gender sensitivity project in Rajasthan. Again, the article is not important for us. It's a very minor development, not relevant for UPSC. But UN Population Fund is important from international relations. The topic is very important as it's a major international organization. So please note on the key facts. It is a subsidiary organ of the United Nations General Assembly. It's a primary work with regard to sexual reproductive health and keep track of the population trends. In the world, this organization was established as a trust fund in the year 1967 and it is headquartered in New York in US. It primarily works in the health sector, focused on the sexual reproductive health and keeps track of population trends and population data and promotes the gender sensitivity, gender equality and other population demographic related issues. It was established by the UN Economic and Social Council, which is one of the primary organs of the UN. The ECOSOC, it's one of the principal organs of UN, like UN Security Council, UN General Assembly, International Court of Justice, etc. So ECOSOC established the UN Population Fund as a subsidiary organ of the UN. It plays a key role in implementing the Sustainable Development Goal number 3, 4, 5 that deals with the health, education and gender equality. That is the primary goal of the UN Population Fund. Previously it was known by a different name. It was called UN Fund for Population Activities. That is why the short form was UNFPA, but now the name has been changed in 1987. The name was changed to UN Population Fund, but the abbreviation has been retained. The old abbreviation itself has been retained. So these are some basic facts that you should be familiar with. And also please note down, it does not get budgetary support from UN. The funds is entirely voluntary from donor governments and other private organizations, NGOs and individuals. It relies only on contributions. It relies on contributions from philanthropists, from NGOs, private companies and few donor governments. It does not have any budgetary support from UN itself. So such facts are relevant for your prelims exam. Next article from page number 4, it refers to flying fox bat, which is a very important species in our ecosystem. So let us understand what the article is talking about, and there are some key concepts I am going to explain. You can see a flying fox here in the image. It is one of the species of the bats. There are many subspecies found around the world. In India as well, we have few subspecies of flying fox bat that are found across the Indian subcontinent. They are found in northeast India, across the Indian subcontinent as well. It's called a fox bat because the appearance, just look at the appearance. If you exclude the wings from for a while and just look at the body of the species, it looks like a small fox, right? After this terrestrial animal, it's named after the fox because of its similarity and appearance. So it is called a fox bat. These fox bats which fly over a certain distances, they are essentially nocturnal species. They are active during night and they forage on fruits, nectar, etc. That is their primary source of food. They are rely on fruits. It is a fruit eating bat and also draws nectar from various trees, flowers, etc. And during daytime, they spend the daytime by hanging upside down in the trees, as you can see here. This in this image, this is called a day roasting. All right, they hang upside down from trees or even cave like rock structures, and they are a kind of semi asleep. They don't sleep entirely. That's why their new study has found during daytime when they are roosting, which is their sleep cycle, during the daytime they are asleep while maintaining such situational awareness. They are vigilant during daytime, and they have unique sensory organs which keeps them vigilant for threats, because they might face threats from predators, from human beings, from environment itself. So even though flying fox bat is asleep, some of the sensory organs are still active during day roosting, to warn the bird about any threats in its nearby region. They often reside as a colony, and they don't stay individually. They reside as a colony where you find hundreds and hundreds of bats together, the ones on outer periphery. Now imagine this is a colony. Here the ones which are resting on the outer periphery here, they are the ones who are more vigilant, because the threat will first come here from outside periphery, and the ones inside the colony are a little more relaxed. They don't maintain heightened vigilance. It's like your border forces maintaining higher vigilance, whereas normal citizens continue to lead normal lives. It's something similar in a bad colony. That's what a new study has found out. Now from a pillar's point of view, what facts are important? Prelims point of view, what facts are important is one primary source of food. It's a fruit eating bat. It relies on nectar as well. It was provided as a vermin, as a pest, because they used to raid orchards. They would destroy the fruits and agricultural crops. So it was considered as a vermin and as a pest, and was listed under the Schedule 5 of the Wildlife Protection Act of 1972, meaning the government would allow the hunting of the species as well if required, as it is treated as vermin. But later studies showed that flying fox bat is a keystone species. It was recognized as a keystone species, highlighting its critical role in the ecosystem. Since then, it has been designated as a protected species under the Schedule 2 of the Wildlife Protection Act. Now this has given a higher degree of protection for flying fox bats. Is that clear? Its protection status has been enhanced because it is a critical species in the ecosystem. It is recognized as a keystone species. Now let me explain what exactly is a keystone species. The term keystone species is actually drawn from the architecture in the world of architecture, where arches are built. You can see arch here, right, where such arches are built in construction. When building and being constructed, to support the arch, there is one critical stone. You can see the stone here, the one in the middle. This is the keystone of this arch. This is a keystone in the center, which is taking the load, taking the weight of the entire arch and supporting the arch on the both sides. If you were to remove this middle stone, the keystone, the entire arch will collapse. Is that clear? This is a reference from architecture. Similarly, a keystone species is so critical to the ecosystem that if you remove that species from the ecosystem, the whole ecosystem can collapse. Entire food chain will be dependent on the certain species. So such a species which is having a huge disproportionate impact on the ecosystem compared to its population, such important species are known as keystone species. For example, a mountain lion not only hunts animals and keeps check on herbivore population, it also helps the bears. The carcasses which is left behind adds nutrients into the soil. Birds dependent on the carcasses for food, so mountain lion often in this example is considered as keystone species. Remove a mountain lion from this ecosystem, you can see here the whole ecosystem and the food chain is going to collapse. Similarly, flying fox bats are considered as a keystone species, primarily because they eat fruits, which means they ingest the seeds and they take the seeds far away and they help in seed dispersal. Through their droppings to their excreta, they dispose the seeds far away, thus helping in seed dispersal, and they play a critical role in the ecosystem. So because of this dramatic disproportionate effect they have on ecosystem compared to their population and size, it's recognized as one of the keystone species. Is that clear? Next small article we will see in the next video. Thanks for watching.